Smoking kills roughly 480,000 Americans every year. It is one of the leading causes of preventable death on the planet. Loneliness kills more. Not metaphorically, not it makes you sad and sad people make bad choices. Physiologically, biologically, at the cellular level, being chronically lonely does more damage to your body than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and most of the people it's killing have no idea it's happening to them. But before we get to why, we need to talk about what loneliness actually is. Because almost everyone gets this wrong, and getting it wrong is part of why it's so dangerous. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. You can be completely alone and feel no loneliness whatsoever. You can be surrounded by people, at a party, in an office, inside a marriage, and feel it so acutely it becomes physical. Psychologists define loneliness as the gap between the social connection you want and the social connection you actually have. It is not a head count, it is a signal. And that signal, when it runs long enough, does something to your body that medicine is only beginning to fully understand. In the 1980s, a psychologist named John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago began chasing a question most of his colleagues considered too soft to be real science. He wanted to know what loneliness does to the human body, not the feelings, the biology. He spent the next 3 decades building the answer, and what he found was not what anyone expected. Cacioppo started by measuring something called the inflammatory response. When your body detects a threat, a virus, a predator, a wound, it triggers inflammation. White blood cells flood the area. Your immune system shifts into attack mode. This is a good thing when the threat is real. It keeps you alive. But Cacioppo found that in chronically lonely people, this inflammatory response was permanently switched on. Not because of a virus, not because of a wound, because of loneliness. Their bodies had identified loneliness as a threat, a biological emergency, and they were fighting it the only way a body knows how, with inflammation. But here is where it gets worse. Chronic inflammation is not a neutral state. Running an immune response indefinitely is like leaving your car engine redlined for years. Everything breaks down faster. Chronically lonely people showed significantly higher rates of heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, and cognitive decline. Their immune systems were simultaneously overactive and weakened, attacking the body while leaving it exposed to actual threats. A 2015 meta-analysis led by Brigham Young University researcher Julianne Holt-Lunstad examined data from 3.4 million people across 70 different studies. Her conclusion was stark. Social isolation increased the risk of early death by 26%. Loneliness increased it by 29%. Living alone increased it by 32%. These numbers are not small. They are comparable to obesity. They exceed the mortality risk of physical inactivity, and they dwarf almost every other lifestyle factor we spend billions of dollars trying to fix. But Cacioppo wasn't done, because inflammation was only half the story. He took his research deeper, into the DNA. Working with researchers at UCLA, Cacioppo found that loneliness doesn't just change what your body does, it changes how your genes express themselves. Specifically, it alters something called the CTRA, the conserved transcriptional response to adversity. This is a genetic program your body runs when it believes you are in serious danger. It upregulates genes involved in inflammation. It downregulates genes involved in antiviral defense. In other words, when your body detects chronic loneliness, it shifts resources away from fighting viruses and toward fighting physical wounds. Because in the world your body was built for, if you were separated from your group, the most likely reason was that something had attacked you. Predators don't give you time to call for help, so your body stops preparing for infection and starts preparing for injury. This was the right response for 99% of human history. It is catastrophically wrong for the world we live in now. Because you are not separated from your group because a leopard attacked you. You are separated from your group because you moved to a new city, or your marriage ended, or your friends got busy with their own lives, or because you have spent the last 3 years communicating primarily through a screen. And your body cannot tell the difference. It sees the same signal. It runs the same program. It starts tearing itself apart, preparing for a wound that is never going to come. Here is the part that should stop you completely. Cacioppo also studied what loneliness does to the brain. He found that lonely people process the world differently. Not emotionally differently, neurologically differently. Using brain imaging, he showed that lonely brains are hypervigilant to social threat. They scan faces faster for signs of rejection. They interpret neutral expressions as hostile. They remember negative social interactions more vividly than positive ones. They are, at a biological level, permanently braced for abandonment. And here is the cruelest part. This hypervigilance makes loneliness self-reinforcing. When you are chronically lonely, your brain is so primed to expect rejection that it begins to create it. You misread a neutral face as cold. You interpret a delayed text as deliberate. You pull back slightly from people who were never pulling away from you. And they, sensing the withdrawal, pull back too. The loneliness deepens. The signal gets louder. The inflammation gets worse. The brain gets more hypervigilant. The cycle continues. Cacioppo called this the loneliness loop. And once you are inside it, getting out is not simply a matter of deciding to be less lonely. Your brain is running a program that actively works against you. So why are we so vulnerable to this? Because for 300,000 years, humans were never alone. Not really. You were born into a group of 25 to 150 people. You slept next to them, hunted with them, raised children surrounded by them. You knew every face in your world, and every face knew yours. Solitude was not a lifestyle choice. It was a death sentence. If you were separated from your group, you were exposed to predators, to starvation, to weather, to everything the world could throw at a single unprotected human body. Your brain evolved to treat isolation as one of the most dangerous states it could be in. It built an alarm system so powerful, so deep, so biologically wired that it could not be ignored. That alarm system is loneliness. It was never meant to be a chronic condition, it was meant to be a warning. Short, sharp, impossible to ignore, that drove you back toward your people as fast as possible. Like hunger, like pain, like thirst. You feel it. You fix it. It stops. But the world we built does not work that way. We built cities where you can live for years without knowing your neighbor's name. We built offices where you sit 3 feet from another human being and communicate by email. We built social networks specifically designed to simulate connection while delivering something that looks nothing like it. We built a world where it is entirely possible to go days, weeks, sometimes months, without a single interaction that reaches the depth your nervous system was built to need. And then we told people that wanting deep connection was needy, that preferring solitude was a personality type, that being independent was a virtue. Your body never got that memo. In 2020, the US Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic, not a mental health issue, not a social problem, a physical health crisis, with measurable biological consequences and a rising body count. The United Kingdom had already appointed a minister for loneliness 3 years earlier, because the data had become impossible to ignore. More than half of Americans report feeling measurably lonely on a regular basis. Among people under 24, that number is closer to 79%. The loneliest generation in recorded history is also the most connected generation in recorded history. They have never had more ways to reach each other, and they have never felt further apart. Cacioppo spent 30 years studying this. He died in 2018. In one of his last interviews, he said something that has stayed with me since I read it. He said that loneliness is not a flaw in human design. It is proof of human design. The fact that isolation hurts this much is evidence of how deeply we were built for each other. The pain is the point. It is your body telling you in the most urgent biological language it has that you were not built to do this alone. You feel it. Your cells feel it. Your immune system feels it. Your DNA feels it. We built a world that is extraordinarily good at keeping you alive and extraordinarily bad at making you feel like you belong to anything. And your body, ancient and unmodified, is trying to tell you that those two things are not actually separate. That belonging is not optional. That connection is not a luxury. That the need you feel to be truly known by another person is not weakness. It is the most human thing about you. And it is killing you that it isn't being met.